absolute strength and the solitude that comes along with it. The one who will teach you about love is ... Who is it, right? What does this quote mean? What is this recurring theme? And who is going to teach Sukuna about love? Well, let's break it all down, but manga spoilers, if you're not caught up, this isn't the video for you. All right, so there's a lot of different things to examine here, but let's start with the quote itself. What exactly is it saying? Absolute strength and the solitude that it brings. Basically, it's lonely at the top, right? When you are the strongest, no one can relate to you and no one can give you purpose. This is mainly explored with Gojo, but it's explored with all of the strongest characters in the verse. You know, Sukuna, Yorozu, Kashimo, for example. But again, it's like the crux of Gojo's character arc. Are you the strongest because you're Gojo, or are you Gojo because you're the strongest? He could never really find his sense of identity, right? And he always struggled because he really just couldn't connect with anyone, especially after Geto died, because no one could understand him at being at that pinnacle because no one was up there to relate, right? And he waxes poetic on this in the airport specifically when he's talking about the flower, like the beautiful flower that everyone can admire, but no one can really understand because they can't relate. So that's the idea. When you are the strongest, you have no one. And so this idea of tying love into it is if you're the strongest and you have no one, you really can't understand love, right? So you would need someone to defeat you and no longer be the strongest to then understand love. Because as the strongest, you can fulfill others and show others love by humbling them, you know, and giving them a purpose, a sense of finally being understood. So Sukuna, as the strongest, as having never lost, does not understand love because he's never been put in that position. He has always been the absolute pinnacle of strength and basically stripped of his humanity. Not only because others can't connect to him, but because he intentionally stripped himself of that humanity, feeling like it was pointless. He has no need for validation from others. He simply eats when he wants to eat, right? He is a natural calamity that has shed everything else in pursuit of strength. And the other strongest characters that we've seen have done this to an extent, but not the extent Sukuna has done it. Because Gojo obviously still retains some of his humanity. He's a good guy, right? He's trying to build a better future. That's arguably why he couldn't ultimately defeat Sukuna. He didn't take it all the way in the same way Sukuna did. And with somebody like Kashimo, for example, he always wanted to feel that love. That's why he spent his whole life looking for somebody worthy for him to fight, to use his curse technique on. But that was his flaw in Sukuna's eyes. Sukuna is like, why do you even care about that? Like, you would have been better with Gojo and Yorozu. Like, I don't care about finding that validation. I simply exist for my own pleasure. So that's the crux of the idea here. Who is going to be able to show Sukuna love, aka who is going to be able to defeat him, humble him, and give him that vulnerability, give him that slice of humanity back. All right, so with that general explanation out of the way, let's now examine how Gege is using this theme to tell the story and to explore Sukuna's characterization. How have other characters tried to teach Sukuna love, and who will ultimately teach him love? But before we get to that, we got to explore what love actually is, right? And of course, you can find thousands of definitions for love out there, but there's some I specifically want to reference because I think Gege is using them. And these are 4 terms for love from the Greek language up here. And these are ancient, but we still use them today. So let's briefly go through these 4. And first up, we've got philia, like Philadelphia, for example, which means the city of brotherly love, right? So this is talking about the type of love shared between friends. Next, we've got storge, which is familial love, aka the love a parent would have for their child. Next, we've got eros love, which is sexual, romantic, you know, the love you would have for your partner. And then finally, we have agape, which is basically an unconditional altruistic love. The love you would have for like a stranger or general mankind. So let's examine each of these and their role in the story. And first of all, let's talk about storge or familial love. And we know that Sukuna was born a cursed, unwanted little wretch. So he obviously didn't have loving parents and didn't experience that type of love. Gege also told us that Sukuna never had any children or anything. So he wouldn't have experienced that type of love in the other direction either. Next, let's talk about eros love, this sexual, romantic type of love. And yorozu is the character Gege uses to showcase this. And this is actually where this all originated, this theme, because yorozu wants to be the one to teach Sukuna about love, but she's going at it from this eros perspective, right? Because she loves him. She is infatuated with him. But she ultimately fails because Sukuna is not interested in that type of love. Again, he doesn't need anyone else to make him happy, to validate him. He lives by his own means. So this is unsuccessful. So this concept of teaching Sukuna about love is introduced with yorozu, but it is really driven home with gojo because it is brought up 4 separate times during their encounter. The first one is right after Gojo gets unsealed and he and Sukuna set the date for their fight on Christmas Eve, right? This quote is brought up almost as a primer or a teaser, suggesting that Gojo might be the one to teach Sukuna about love. It's then brought up again at the end of one of the chapters where they're fighting, basically setting up this renewed engagement, once again suggesting that Gojo may be the one to do this. However, the next time it's brought up, it's not in relation to Sukuna, it's in relation to Gojo himself. Gojo is thinking about the last time he was this excited, and it was when he was fighting Toji. So now, once again, Sukuna is satisfying him with this excellent fight. So Gojo is the one that's being, not taught love necessarily, but he's the one that's being satisfied here, not Sukuna. And then the final time that it's brought up is in the airport, after Gojo has lost. And this time it's being brought up as, well, it wasn't Gojo, so who is going to be the one to teach Sukuna about love? So what kind of love was Gojo representing and why wasn't it successful? Well, in my opinion, I think Gege was using him to represent philos love, the love between friends, right? And obviously they're not friends, so let's use the word rivals. It's more appropriate, right? Because they were both having a hell of a time here. The best fight either of them have presumably ever had, definitely the best fight Gojo had, and presumably the best fight Sukuna has ever had up until this point. And they were having some friendly banter, honestly, back and forth. They were both living their best lives right here. The difference is Gojo needed this because he's never had it and he's still latched on to some of his humanity, right? He's looking for that purpose in his life. So this was the most fulfilling for him, which is why the third time that quote brought up, it was in reference to Gojo's satisfaction. However, Sukuna doesn't need this. Like we talked about earlier, he doesn't need that outside validation from anyone. Sure, he's having a great time and he's enjoying himself, but he didn't need this because he lives for his own pleasure. He doesn't need the outside validation. He doesn't need anybody else to reflect onto him to show him who he is. He knows who he is. So this too was unsuccessful. So after the Gojo fight, Gege will use Kashimo to kind of drive home this fact and show us why Sukuna is different from the rest of these strongest, because he thinks love is worthless. The thought of needing someone else to fulfill me never crossed my mind. He's basically like, I'm me, I do me, and that's all there is to it. So Sukuna just has a different mindset than these other people. He's never looked for that love. He's never needed that validation or that fulfillment, right? Because he's already found it in his own worldview. This worldview of shedding everything else in the pursuit of his own ideals, his own strength, his own selfishness. These other characters, namely Gojo, but the others as well, weren't able to fully do that. They weren't able to become the natural calamities, the truly selfish individuals and such. They thought they still needed this validation. They needed that fulfillment, and that was the weakness in Sukuna's eyes. So if Philia, Storge, and Eros all didn't work, then all we've got left is Agape. So the one to teach Sukuna about love is Itadori Yuji, the MC himself, the only character whose strength of ideals matches Sukuna's own. They are foils, complete opposites. Yuji represents everything Sukuna despises, which is why he hates Yuji so much, right? Because Sukuna shed his humanity, went full throttle selfishness in order to pursue strength, and he achieved it, right? He stands alone at the top. That's why he's never had to question anything he's ever done. But when he is humbled and beaten by Yuji, who represents the exact opposite, selflessness, he pursued strength in order to protect and help others unconditionally, then Sukuna will finally realize that he chose wrong. And this dynamic was established in the very first chapter with his grandpa's dying words to him: help people. You may feel lost, don't expect gratitude, just help them. This is describing that agape love, that selfless, unconditional love for complete strangers. And this is the antithesis to everything Sukuna stands for. And just like Sukuna was giddy to fight Maki to test his jujutsu against her heavenly restriction to see if he devoted his life to the right thing, he will be humbled when he loses to Yuji and realizes that selflessness is the key to true strength. So that's my 2 cents on it. I think it's going to be our boy Yuji. The narrative parallels are aplenty. Plus, if they do end up being twins or something, it becomes even more poetic. But definitely let me know y'all's thoughts in the comments, who you think will teach Sukuna about love. And finally, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching.